So this is our second Robert Frost poem. Seems to be a theme we're going to go with, and I'm going to go through the poem and kind of explicate it in my way, and then go back to what critics say, which I'm not sure I entirely agree with on this. And the ambiguity of poetry is sort of the point. And when you're trying to write an essay, one of the things you're going to do is argue a specific point. You're trying to, it needs to be arguable, but you need to have enough from the text to back up what you're trying to say. And I just don't know if there's enough here for what the critics say, but we'll look at it my way first, and then we'll see sort of surface, and then we'll dig a little deeper in what some other people have said about the poem. And again, the title could not be any more sort of whimsical, and it's, stopping by woods on a snowy evening. The imagery there is great, and so, either it's a happy little fun poem, like a Bob Ross painting, or it's a depressing poem, depending on to whom you speak. So, let's go through it. Whose woods these are, I think I know. His house is in the village, though. Because the idea there being the person's not around, he's out there alone, and all to himself, and this guy lives in the village, and so he uses woods and village as kind of these opposing ideas, society versus nature, and that kind of thing. He will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. So again, nobody's going to see him out there. There's, he's all alone. My little horse must think it queer to stop without a farmhouse near. This is interesting. So he's saying that the horse thinks this is odd because he's stopping and there's really no reason to stop. So we know that this is something that's out of the ordinary, and the horse is confused about what he's attempting to do by stopping and just sort of taking in this moment. Between the woods and frozen lake, the darkest evening of the year. Now, when I originally read this, I sort of saw that differently. Again, we'll see how differently some critics interpret this in a second, but I've always seen, when I originally read this, I saw this line as the darkest evening of the year, implying the winter solstice. And so to me, when I originally read this, which could very much be erroneous, because he does not say the longest evening of the year, he says the darkest evening of the year. But I'd kind of seen that as winter solstice, which is the basis for a lot of holidays. Every major religion has a winter holiday. Christians have Christmas, Jews have Hanukkah, which is really a minor Jewish holiday, to be honest. It's sort of a way of having their own Christmas. It's really not that important to the religion, but they've done that. Everybody does that. And, Wicca, which I do not know that much about, I'm pretty sure celebrates the winter solstice. So I know religions way before Christianity did. So, to me, it's almost that there's this sense of spirituality that he gets from this moment. And to me, life is about these just little moments where you just sort of enjoy things and stop and kind of take it in and relax. And we live our lives pretty much on autopilot. And we sort of have these mindless moments, as Annie Dillard would call them, or actually a lot of people will call them mindful moments now, which is a big movement in therapy and psychology and various other fields. He gives his harness bells a shake to ask if there is some mistake. So again, we go back to this horse thinking it's odd, and he sort of, the imagery there, remember, imagery doesn't just have to be what you see, it's what you hear and smell, and to anything that's tangible through the senses. And so we get that, the harness bells, which give it, again, my students always want to say this poem is about Christmas. It's not. I mean, you have the sleigh bells ring line in songs, but those bells just really a lot of times indicate winter and snow and that sort of thing, to ask if there is some mistake. So it sort of wakes him up out of this a little bit. The only other sound's the sweep of easy wind and downy flake. And I love that line, the idea of, if you've ever been out in the snow, because it's really more the sound of silence. You have this absorption of all sound. And so one of the only times in my life that I ever remember hearing nothing, you know, we're constantly being bombarded by noises, whether air conditioner or computer hums or bugs or those kinds of things. And in the snow, that was absorbed. And I remember having a moment like this when we had a lot of snow when I was a kid, and I was walking home late at night and realized it was the only time that I'd ever not heard anything. Of course, what he hears now is the sweep of easy wind and downy flakes. So he can hear just a little bit of wind and the flakes hitting the snow. So it's a nifty little thing there. And again, downy, if you don't know what that means, it's on those list of the flashcards that I posted with vocabulary terms I talked about in my last set of notes. So if you don't know it, look it up. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. So again, when I read this initially, interpreted it in college myself, I sort of saw it as, you know, he wakes up out of this, he has this nice little moment, but he's got to move on. Now, let's look at and see what critics have said. We'll look at some specific words here. Again, he's in the woods, all alone, no one's around. What they're basically saying is he's contemplating death, and a lot of people say specifically he's contemplating suicide. To me, it's a little bit of a stretch, but we'll look at what they say with that. You know, the horse, again, knows that this is odd. Maybe, you know, animal is sensing something's up and he's going to do something drastic. He's all alone. Of course, nothing good ever happens in the woods in a lot of literature, even though Frost was big on the woods, so that's a stretch to make. But, you know, you read earlier literature, and if you were in the woods, you were up to no good. Again, between the woods and frozen lake, so we've got this frozen lake, and then the darkest evening of the year. That's the line that critics really go to, because maybe it's not the darkest evening of the year as far as, you know, what makes one evening darker than the other. With, I guess, the stars aren't out, or the moon's not out, or whatever, but, you know, with snow tends to make evenings not that dark. And so the idea that it's his darkest evening, right, that's a superlative. It doesn't get any more dark than the darkest evening of the year, and maybe this is the darkest point in his life, or whatever. He gives his harness bells a shake to ask if there is some mistake. You know, we'll be back to this wind and downy flake. The woods are lovely, dark, and deep. And this is an interesting choice of words here, because they seem oxymoronic in a way, you know, contradictory. It's lovely, which is a positive word, and then dark, which is not a positive word, a very negative word, and deep, which again we could read as negative. But I have promises to keep. The idea there being, if we're going to buy into this suicide thing, I have things to do. I have promises to keep. I can't commit suicide. I can't die. I've got to go on. And then we see sleep, you know, very often we use it as a euphemism for death, the big sleep, or, you know, go to sleep forever. You have your dogs put to sleep. You don't kill them. You say that you have them put to sleep. And so he says, you know, miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. So basically saying, hey, I'm not going to commit suicide because of these other obligations. So, you know, take it how you want to on this one. I certainly don't think it's as clear cut as is The Road Not Taken, but about it. Read it and tell me what you think. Loibner-Waitkus.